Tom Bowling, and I want to share some beautiful ideas with you for the autumn season. And autumn is that time of the year, whether you actually have a huge temperature change or you just really want it to be, but the colors intensify in autumn. In other words, the summertime where they're bleached and that kind of a softer palette wanes, and then all of a sudden the autumn colors pop and they're intense in color. And even people that don't live in an area where necessarily the leaves change, they still want that look and they still want that comfort and feel like it's going to happen. So I'm going to share some color palette here that has that, and you're going to recognize some of the components that we pull through from the summer and we bleed into that autumn, kind of making it more of a transition type of a time. One of those is the that fern that you've probably seen in previous videos. And I love to use containers like this rectangle, the birch, where it stretches my material out, and it gives me a lot of surface foam to work into. And as you can see, I've put my dry foam into the container, mossed around that, and now I'm ready to begin my composition. I want to go ahead and secure that fern in place, and I'm going to hairpin that. I'm just going to take a stem, a leftover stem that we had from another project, bend it in half, hairpin that onto the foam, and let that cascade, let it fill out and hang over the edge. Same using the Dusty Miller. We don't really think of Dusty Miller as an autumn product. However, it's going to work very well for us. In a previous video, I talked about colors and how there are certain colors that harmonize, that work well with all colors, and gray happens to be one of those. And the Dusty Miller, as you can tell, just gives us that wonderful feel. Now, what I was just doing, it was manufactured this way, and maybe nature grew it that way, but guess what? The beauty of doing permanent botanicals is that you can alter those, and just because they were made a particular way doesn't mean you have to use it in that manner. So don't hesitate to twist and pull and deconstruct and reconstruct and make it work for something that you want it to be. All right, when we think of autumn, there are certain icons that we feel like should be a part of that. Cattails, when in fact really cattails are June and July, but we think of them using them in the fall or autumn time period. So cattails are one of those good materials that we definitely want to make sure that we include in our mix, not only for seasonality, but also too in the fact that we want to be able to sell products to our customers to let them do their own thing. That whole DIY market, super strong, and be a part of that. There's no reason that you can't sell your customer your components. And you go, well, Tom, if you do that, then they're not going to need you. No, they're actually, you're going to sell them the components, which they're going to buy anyway, maybe at a local craft store. So you might as well be the source on that, and let those people go home, enjoy creating their own arrangements. And it may take them 6 times longer than it does you, but it doesn't matter. They're having a good time, and really, you've made a grand sale. The only thing that you haven't charged them is for your labor, because your labor, you don't have labor. They're going to do everything on their own. Now, you hear me and you've heard me say that labor. What is labor? Labor is the charge that you assess your customer to take raw components, raw goods, and to make them into a finished component or a finished arrangement. So what I'm doing here is I'm doing the work, and I'm going to pass that on to my customer in the form of labor. And so there's nothing wrong with that. You're not doing something, on the shady side, etc. Labor is what you get paid. And Team Floral is wonderful about talking about labor, how we charge it, why we charge it. And we're not saying that everybody has to charge the same amount. That is so not the case. However, it's saying that what do you charge labor for a fresh? And for me, Tom Bowling, I charge differently for certain parts of what I do. For instance, my labor charge on a fresh might be maybe 20% of the cost of goods, everything that I'm including into the composition. But when I do a permanent styling, or maybe a wedding bouquet or something along that line, my labor increases because it takes a lot more to knowledge to go into and to make that really happen. So don't be afraid to, put that labor charge on, because if you're not charging labor, then the bottom line is you shouldn't be getting paid, and they're probably not getting paid. So, every contract has contracted service, whether it be an auto mechanic, whether it be a plumber. Think about all of those people. They charge you aggressively for their labor, and it's because you're paying for their expertise. When I take my vehicle to the auto mechanic, I expect them to charge a labor. And unfortunately, sometimes I charge a little bit more than what I really care to have charged. However, it's still, I understand that, I expect it, and then we move forward. So don't be hesitant to put that labor charge on, and I'm very upfront about it. So it's not buried or masked in any way. This is the cost of my container, this is the cost of my setup, meaning my foam and my moss and all those, the glue, etc. And then this is the cost of the components that I'm using, all these pieces and parts, and now my labor is factored on top of that and added in. So, I'm not ashamed to say I get paid for what I do, and my customer's gonna pay for my expertise, and that's okay. Nothing wrong with that. So keep that in mind, and don't hesitate to reach out to Team Floral if you have any questions about, labor and the charges and things along that line. Even when I do wedding work, my labor changes and varies under the wedding. I charge a different amount for personal flowers for bouquet work. I charge a different amount for my flowers that people wear. Because it takes a lot more knowledge, and I'm getting rewarded for all of that time that I've spent learning how to do that particular part of the wedding. If I'm doing centerpiece work where it's, putting them all together, I don't even think about it, it's just happening, my labor charge can be even lower than it would be for a wedding bouquet. So I turn this around just so you can get an idea of what I'm developing here and how I'm developing it. I love these little miniature corn from Pioneer Imports and Wholesale. They're just fun. Novelty. And we were talking about novelty. There are certain things that your customer expects for you to have during that autumn season. Cattails being one, miniature pumpkins. And if you haven't seen Pioneer's collection of little pumpkins and things along that line, take a look at their catalog, because it's amazing all the different things that they offer. And again, seasonal components, nothing wrong with that. I tend not to do a lot of what I call novelty, especially containers and things like that, where there's a very limited season that I can sell these. I want to go broader with my offerings. So totally, again, up to you and your customer. If they're going to sell and sell well, no issue. But if they're, you're speculating on this inventory, it's like, whoa, yeah, it's over. So keep it in mind. adding that blue. I love putting the blue in. It's not a flower, it's not a color that you normally associate with fall, but look at the impact that that blue gives us in our composition here. So I'm extending the length on some of my stems just to give me a little bit more impact here. I want to go taller to balance off the side with the tall cattails here. I'm going to include the here, and you'll notice that what's happening. This is a good observation. This is what we call a plateau. In design, it means your eye is stopping right here. It just, your eye doesn't go any further down. So when you have multiple components, and especially if they're the same components, you want to give some variation either in your height or your size or something so your eye doesn't stop. I always call it like a visual belt. You know, you've got a belt right here and your eye is just going around, and that's exactly where it stops. So I'm going to strengthen that and bring that up just a little bit more. Again, adding some extra stemming on here. Hairpin. Insertion into my dry foam. Well, that didn't do what I wanted it to do. All right, Tom, let's add just another strengthening material here. Gonna add a wood pick. And if you're working in fresh, wood picks are your friend, because when you add a wood pick into wet floral foam, wettable foam, the wood swells and it anchors and holds things in place. All right, now you can see the difference. Look how your eye goes step, 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 all the way through the composition. Let's reverse that, take a look, add a couple more into this. And then I'm going to pull your eye deep into the design using depth, creating depth, pulling, you know, interest into the design work itself. And then I want to put that cattail back in there. Yeah, and then that's a good thing. Step back, take a look, see where, you know, if I'm heavy here, I need to add a little bit more visual weight onto the opposite side. So I'm going to do that with the use of the Dusty Miller. Make sure the price tags are removed. And I love the use of the negative space. And negative space is so important in our design work. And there's two different kinds of space, really. You can kind of define it down into two. There's a positive space and a negative space. And it's really important that we have both of those in any composition. So let's define that so you can see. First of all, this is positive space. My hand is positive space. It takes up an amount of space within the environment here. It's solid, that's my space. And if you look at my hand, and I always teach it this way, if you look at your hand, take your hand and stretch it out and squint your eyes, you lose the individual components. In other words, you lose your fingers because it all just looks like one big mass. But the minute you open that up and you introduce negative space, or the space around an object, now all of a sudden that becomes so much more important because you see each individual finger. Same thing what I've done here is the negative space in the composition, this area around where I've got a grouping and a grouping. Now all of a sudden each one of those areas of interest becomes very, very dynamic only by taking and spreading out or introducing the negative space. So we've learned a lot in this particular composition. As I turn it around, you can get an idea, get the feel how each side is just a little bit different. It's still a centerpiece, but what I have happening on one side doesn't mean the same component is expressed on the other side. It just means the balance is there. So I'm spinning this around. Love the dinner plate dahlia tucked way down into the design, as you can see here. It draws your eye, the color draws your eye, it pulls, and then that plateau or that flat surface right here gives your eye an area to rest into. So now I've got your eye, I want it to rest. Oh, that feels good. But now let's explore the other components in here and the other design principles and elements. I'm loving it. I am so ready for the autumn season, and I hope you are too.